So we're on Daf Nun Aleph, Amud Aleph, and we're up to Tanur Rabbanan. Let's see if we can find a place here on Nun Aleph, Amud Aleph. It's about 2/3 of the way down the Amud, Tanur Rabbanan. Let's see. Oh yeah, there are thin lines and wide lines. So how many lines up is before it gets wide at the bottom? We're in the thin lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines up from the bottom of the thin lines. Ketzad Omar Rabbi Gamliel ain't get achar get. So we've discussed way back in the Mishnah, Machlokes Shin Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim about get lachar get. And this brisa is going to make life a little easier for us because he's going to talk about shtei Yevamot. We never understood why a person would give the same get to the same, another get to the same Yevamot. So let's assume he has 2 Yevamos, and his late brother was married to 2 wives, and now he died, and both Yevamos fall for Yibum. He gave a get to the first one and a get to the second one. And if we said many times over that the implication of a get in the context of Yibum on a D'Rabbanan level, because on a D'Oraisa level get is meaningless. The Torah gives 2 options, either bia or chalitza. There's no such thing as get, but the Rabbanan recognize the get, and that gives the Rabbanan what's called the Iser of Krovas Grushasa. Now, the question here is, if he's not allowed to marry the Krova, or the Krovos, I should say, in plural, of his Grusha, does that apply to the first Yevama and the second Yevama, or only to the first Yevama? And that's going to be the Machlokes Shin Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim. So Shtei Yevama shenaflu fnei Yavam echa v'nasan get lezu v'get lezu. Rabbi Gamliel Omer choletz l'rishona. Okay, we'll see the significance of this statement in just a minute. But what's more important, just for the sake of understanding Rabbi Gamliel in terms of what ein get le'achar get means, is be aser bikrovoseh. So when it says the word here in the brisa bikrovoseh, and it's using a pronoun, you can add the word l'rishona or shel harishona, which means that, let's say there's Rachel and Leah, and Shimon gave a get to Rachel. He's no longer allowed to marry the relatives of Rachel once he gives her the get, which means he can't marry her sister, he can't marry her mother, he can't marry her daughter, all those krovos, because that becomes krovas grushasa. And that's a D'Rabbanan, insofar as the Rabbanan recognize the get. However, mutar v'krovos shniya, he's allowed to marry the relatives of Leah, because the get that he gave to Leah is meaningless. It doesn't register at all. Eino chal klam. So Leah is not grushasa, and therefore her krovos are not prohibited vis-a-vis Shimon, who gave her a get. Forget about that get. The get is, again, if I could use this term, it's a Masechet b'alma. It's meaningless. Now let's go back to the first part of Rabbi Gamliel's statement, choletz l'rishona, and we can now, moving backwards, understand and appreciate choletz l'rishona. Why? Because if he would give chalitza to the shniya, to Leah, as we called her, which is definitely a feasible possibility, but then he's going to generate a brand new Iser that didn't exist. What do I mean? With regard to the Rishona, the Chalitza doesn't add any Isurim. It doesn't generate new Isurim, because as far as the Rishona, we've already established Aser v'krovoseh by virtue of the get that he gave to the Rishona, to Rachel. So when he gives Chalitza to Rachel, doesn't change anything. It doesn't add anything. But if, on the other hand, he would opt, which again, on a D'Oraisa level, he has that choice, to give Chalitza to Leah the Shniya, then he's going to create new Isurim for himself. It's not a good idea. I mean, counsel would give him, a recommendation that it's better to give chalitza to the Rishona to Rachel rather than Leah, because what you do is if you give chalitza to Leah, then that's going to result and generate isurim in krovas hashniya, because now it becomes the krovos of chalutza, which we had a long discussion. Oh, wait a minute, that's in a different chapter. Wait. All right. Is that in this chapter? I get a little confused here, right? Help me out here, Steve. That's in the other chapter. Yeah, it's in the other chapter. Right, where we spent endless amount of time on the concept of whether we piggyback the Iser of Shnias Larais on top of Krovas Chalutzasa. But be that as it may, there's a rabbinic Iser called Krovas Chalutzasa, which is not going to apply to the Krovas of the Shnia if he does it right, if he gets it right, and he gives Chalitza to the Rishona. He's already also Krovas Rishona. That he's covered his ground on that because of the get. And the Rabbanan recognized that get. But according to Rabbi Gamliel, the Rabbanan did not recognize the second get. So right now he's okay, and he's allowed to marry all the Krovos of the Shnia because she didn't get the get. She receiving, right? I mean, she received a physical get, but not a halachic get, because we don't validate or give any significance to the second get. But if he gives the Shnia Chalitza, she becomes, her Krovos becomes Krovos Chalutzas. So why get yourself into that mess, so to speak? Everybody wants to expand their options in marriage, we assume. Again, this is all a recommendation. That's the counsel we would give you if you're smart. Okay, now we go over to the Chachamim sheet. They hold yesh get liachar get. Chachamim omim nosan get lezu v'get lezu. So Jeff, you were always interested in the mistakes that he makes. He's making a double mistake here. First of all, why is he giving a get? He should be giving chalitza. And secondly, if you already gave a get to the Rishona, let it be like chalitza to the Rishona, and the Shnia doesn't need chalitza, she doesn't need get. So he made a double mistake. Because he didn't come to our shiurim.
His thinking with get is to eliminate the Zika.
Right. And the second mistake is it's not enough to eliminate the Zika from one Yevamot. You have to eliminate the Zika from the second Yevamot. That's his double mistake. Okay, but that's fine. I mean, Rabbi Gamliel is not questioning this, the mindset of the person who gave two gets, but Rabbi Gamliel said the second get is meaningless. But the Chachamim say, also b'krovot shteihen. It's like in my Rebbe would say it's a Masechet gerushin without a chalos gerushin. But it's a Masechet gerushin. And according to the Chachamim, a Masechet gerushin is enough to generate an Iser in the krovos. Now, when we get to Chalitza, he's got a choice. Flip a coin. Which one of the two does he give Chalitza to? It makes no bit of a difference. Chalitza liachas man. Not to Rishona, not to the Shnia, but whichever one he wants, because it matters not. Of course, once again, he gave a get to the first one. He's also b'krovos seh. He gave a get to the second one. The Chachamim recognize, validate the second get to the second Yevamot, and therefore he's also b'krovos hashniya. And Chalutza is going to generate an Iser of krovos, but he's already also b'krovos seh machmas haget. He says it came in Shenosan laget Nesru Olav. Oh, okay. So he gives another. Okay, just 1 second. I see here that he gives a little bit of an additional twist here. Oh, I see. He's just explaining why he needs to give chalitza. So he says the following. Yibum is no longer an option. Yibum is no longer an option. Why? Because the Rabbanan recognize get as hafkas zik midrabanan. Once they validated the get as Afkaz Zika, Yibum is out of the question. Oh, now he has two Yevamos that are Yevamos Lashuk on a Dorais level. They can't get married. They need Chalitza. But he doesn't have to give Chalitza to both of them. He only has to give Chalitza to one of them. Because one Chalitza is sufficient. Now he adds another sentence here. Let's see what this is. The Kemon Shechalitza Shteem Psulahi Uposlos B'Shava. Okay, I'm not sure what he means by that. I don't know. Not sure. Maybe he means that it generates an Isur on Hakrovos. That doesn't really fit into the language. All right. I don't want to waste any time on that. I think we have shot. Okay. Now, let's address a different scenario. Kain Ata Omer, we're going to use the same principles, the same dinim, in the following scenario. B'shnei Yevamim, the Yevama Achas. So the late Reuven was married to one woman, but he left behind him two brothers, Shimon and Levi. And in this case, both Shimon and Levi each gave a get to the same Yevama respectively. They both gave a get. There was one get after the other get. And now we're going to apply the same machlokas from Gamliel and Chachamim about whether yesh get liachar get to this scenario. So let's take Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel holds that ain't get liachar get, which means not only in a case, as we discussed earlier, where Shimon gave a get to both Rachel and Leah, but even in a case where Levi, after Shimon gave a get to the single Yevama, which is Rachel, Levi decided to give a get to Rachel. The second get is meaningless. Only the first get is recognized midrabanan, which means he can no longer marry, he meaning Shimon. Again, we have to emphasize that, right? Shimon is now enjoined from marrying any of the relatives of this one single Yevama, Rachel. Shimon, Levi also gave a get. Why do you say, you're picking favorites over here? You're saying that Shimon became Asur B'Krovas Rachel by virtue of what? Of the get that he delivered to Rachel. But then you're going to say, well, Levi is allowed to marry the relatives of Rachel, despite the fact that he gave a get to Leah. To Rachel. He also gave a get. So why do you give preference why do you give special treatment to Levi? But the answer is because Rabbi Gamliel holds aim get liachar get. He doesn't want to recognize the second get, even on a D'Rabbanan level. Now you could ask another question. To whom should he give chalitza? No, I'm sorry. Who should give chalitza? That's what I meant. And there's only one Yevamah. There's only Rachel. She's the only show in town. So if Reuven will give, if Shimon will give chalitza to Reuven, nothing changes. He's already also b'krovas Rachel by virtue of his get. So the chalitza wouldn't have any negative impact, so to speak. Narrow his shidduchim pool. But if Levi will opt to give chalitza to Rachel, then there's halacha of Isur Krovos Chalutza. So therefore, it would be very advisable for Shimon to do the chalitza, not Levi. And we don't care who's older. In this case, right? We remember the B'char and the Gadol Shebach. Forget about all that. That's irrelevant. Okay, now let's talk about the Chacham. The Chachamim hold yesh get liachar get. So if both Yevamim, that means Shimon and Levi, each gave a get to Rachel, then each one is enjoined from the Krovos of Rachel. Meaning even Levi, who gave the second get to Rachel, the subsequent get, he is enjoined from marrying the relatives of Rachel because yesh get liachar get. We recognize that get. And then if you ask me who should give chalitza to Rachel, whether it's Shimon or Levi, it's just toss a coin. The Brisa continues. Ketzad Omer Rab Gamliel ein Maim Rachamayim. Right now, we go to the Sefer of Rab Gamliel. Rab Gamliel argued against Chacham twice. Once, ein get leachar get. Number two, ein Maim Rachamayim. So first, we're going to talk about what we call the simple case. There are two Yevamos, and there's only one Yavam. And again, Jeff is going to ask me, so what's this guy is really, I mean, he gives Maimer to both Rachel and Leah. I guess he believes that the mitzvah Yibum applies to all the wives. I don't know if this is Taivas Noshim, what he wants. He has a desire to be married to both of them, I guess. Amar Gamliel, ein machar. Shtei Yevamot shenaflu lifnei Yavam echad, v'yasa Maimer bezu, u'Maimer bezu. Why not? You wonder if this guy should be suspected of murder. Maybe he murdered his brother. I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so what happens now? According to Rabbi Gamliel, the Rabbanan will recognize the first Maimar to Rachel and disqualify and invalidate the second Maimar to Leah. It means that the first Maimar undermines the possibility of the Yavam doing Maimar to the Shniya. Meaning, even within the context of Zeros the Rabbanon, there's a limit to how far the Rabbanon are going to go. The Torah doesn't recognize Maimar even for the Rishonah. We'll recognize Maimar for the Rishonah. And what that means is, number one, he's also b'krovoseha, correct? Because the Rabbanan are recognizing the Maimar, so it's Ishus, and it's like Krovos Grushaso, because afterwards he's going to have to give a chalitza. I think we have to also emphasize something else. That as a result of the Maimar, he's not allowed to be miyabim. Well, let's hold off on that. I just want to double check to make sure I got that right. No. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. As a result of the Maimar to the Rishona, to Rachel, he's closed himself off, midrabanan, from the possibility of being miyabim Leah. Okay?
Leah's the
Shniya. Why? Because he's already started the process of Yibum with regard to the Rishona. We're not going to allow him to have Yibum with the Shniya. Okay, now let's ask the following question. Who needs a get? If the Rabbanan are recognizing Maimar, then it's not enough to give Chalitza to remove the Zikas Yibum, but to the extent that we recognize Kesef and Shtar as Ishus, as creating Ishus, we need a get as well. Is Rabbi Gamliel Omer no saying get the Richona? Only the Rishona requires a get. He did Maimer to the Shnia. Rabbi Gamliel says, ain't Maimer acha Maimer. There's a limit to how far the Chacham are going to go. Take your choice. You want to marry the Rachel, marry Rachel, but don't tell me that you're going to be having both of them. That you can't do. The Torah doesn't recognize any sort of leniency with regard to the second one, and therefore Maimar is ridiculous. No, it's Maimar. I mean, you could add another point over here. Maimar is validated midrabbanan because it's like the beginning of Yibum. It's the first stage in Yibum. But Maimar is also recognized to be mafkia the zikas Yibum to the Shnia, to Leah, because he can't have a Yibum once he's already implemented a Maimar to Hatzara, to the other Yevamot. We call the Rach. Once he's done Maimar with Rach, he cannot be Miyabim Leah. If he can't be Miyabim Leah, then the Maimar to Leah is not the beginning of Yibum, because that Maimar could never culminate in Yibum. So Bishleim Rishona, we can validate the Maimar Midrabanan because it's on the way to Yibum, and he could be Miyabim. But once he did the Maimar to the Rishona, the Rabbanan said, that's it. As far as the Zika to the Shnia, you don't have any option of Yibum to the Shnia to Leah. Therefore, we're not even going to recognize the Maimar to Leah, because that Maimar is not a Maimar that could be seen as like stage one, Shlav Aleph, that would culminate with Yibum. There is no Yibum to the Shnia. Okay, now Choletz law. Okay, now we understand very well with the same logic that we applied earlier. In the case of a get, we're going to apply that logic here in the case of Maimar. It would not be to his benefit to give Chalitza to Leah, because by giving Chalitza to Leah, he's going to generate an Isa to the Krovos of Leah, because of the Drabanan of Krovos Chalutzas. Is therefore Choletz law. I'm going to give a whole drush on the word law. That law refers to the Rishona, because it says no saying get the Rishona, v'choletz law. The word law is going back on the Rishona. Let's see what he says. B'tzorach lafkia es kinyan ha'maimer she'asaba. Oh, he's explaining why Rachel needs two things. Not only does she need chalitza, which is a doraisa, to allow her to marry someone else, she also needs a get, because the Rabbanan recognized the Maimar as if he married her with a full-fledged ishus, and therefore she needs a get. So no saying get the Rishona, v'choletzla. The Shnia does not need a get, even though he gave Maimar to the Shnia. Because Rabbi Gamliel doesn't recognize Maimar Achar Maimar. The first Maimar blocked or made it impossible for the second Maimar to register at all, even Midrabbanan. And there's no option of Yibum. As far as Chalitza is concerned, certainly Leah can't get married without Chalitza, but he would be ill-advised to give Leah Chalitza, because that's going to generate new Isurim Midrabanan of Krovas Chalutza. So give Chalitza to Rachel. Again, you're going to have to give a get to Rachel as well. We're going to beat you blue in this black and blue until you give her both a get and Chalitza. Because now, after the Maimar, that's the only way she can get out of this marriage. Umuta also b'krovoseha. Again, it's funny, because if you ask me why he's also b'krovoseha referring to Rachel, there are two answers to that question. They're both right. First of all, it's krovas gruchaso, because he has to give her a get. And secondly, it's krovas chalutzaso, because he has to give her a chalitza. But I don't think it makes a dent of a difference. But then mutar b'krovas shnia, because we don't recognize the Maimar to the shnia, and therefore that Maimar doesn't generate neither a requirement of a get, nor an Iser b'krovosel. But again, that's on the condition he's a good boy and he doesn't give chalitza to Leah. Right? So when you read Muta b'krovos hashniya, you have to add a lumdis why the mimer to the shniya does not generate an Iser to her krovos, to Leah's krovos, her mother, her sister, her daughter. And the lumdis is because we don't recognize the mimer. And then you have to give an answer to the question of chalitza. The answer is that she's not going to get chalitza, hopefully, if all things work out. And the chalitza will only be on Rachel and not on Leah. So it's interesting. Here we would go in the opposite direction. Before, when we spoke about Gerich, we mentioned the Masechet Gerich without the chalos. Here I would say the opposite. I would say that you're going to have a chalutza without a Maisa chalitza, vis-a-vis the shniya, because the chalitza is being performed with Rachel, but it's chal vis-a-vis Leah. And if you ask me, she has the status of a chalutza, but she's not a chalutza. Why? Because she didn't get the Maisa chalitza. And when the Rabbanan prohibited krovas chalutza, so it's dafka the Maisa chalitza. The Chachamim omrim, no saying get l'shneiam because yesh maimer acher maimer. So the Rabbanan of Rabbi Gamliel will recognize the validity of the second maimer to Leah. Again, as far as Yibum is concerned, both of them are out of the box of Yibum. Neither Leah nor Rachel are candidates for Yibum. Why? Because the maimer to the tzara blocks Yibum to the other tzara. And each one got a maimer, and we're recognizing both maimers. Which means that both of them are included in the Iser of Krovos Maimer, and not only that, they're going to each require a get, so that's Krovos of Grushaso. However, don't make the mistake in thinking that both of them will require chalitza. That's not so. One chalitza, per family. That one chalitza will cover both Rachel and Leah. Would it make a difference which one of the two he gave chalitza to? Absolutely not. Because he's also b'krovos shtein. So there's no possibility of yibum, neither with Rachel nor with Leah. There's an Isa Krovos gam l'Rachel and gam l'Leah. And as far as chalitza is concerned, although both of them need a get, each one needs a get, machmas ma'amoro, but only one of them needs chalitza, and it would not make any difference which of them had chalitza. Also, b'krovos shteim, chalitza achas v'chalitza le'achas mihen. Right, he has to remove the zikim in Torah, but he has a choice of which one to give chalitza to. Okay, so that's as far as shtei yevamos li yavam echad. Now we're going to have shnei yevamim li yevama achas. V'chein ataom v'shnei yevamim li yevama achas. Okay, he has an explanation here, but I mean, again, I think we could do it on our own, but maybe just to save time, we'll do it inside. So we're talking about two brothers, we'll call them Shimon and Levi, both of whom gave Maimar to Rachel. A lot of competition here between the two brothers. Okay. Sha'asa ba we call Rachel. Kol echad mehem, both Shimon and Levi, Maimar. Lidas Rabbi Gamliel, ein Maimar achar Maimar, which means that Levi's Maimar doesn't register. It's command the lesson, it's garnished with garnished. And therefore, Levi would be allowed to marry the Krovos of Rachel. Let's see if we're right. And again, Levi's get, if he went ahead and gave a get, which he won't give a get, but I'm saying if we asked him to give a get, that get would not help Rachel. She desperately needs to get from from Shimon. Let's see it inside. He says, "Hamaimar Arishon Kana Utzricha get lemamoro." V'chalitza latira mizikas yib. So, as far as Rachel is concerned, just 1 second. As far as Rachel is concerned, she'll need both a get from Reuben and chalitza. That means Levi's maimer to Rachel, lo kana klal. Tzricha get, so she doesn't need a get, and a get from Levi is not going to help her because she desperately needs a get from Shimon. Umuta b'krovas hashniya, which means that. Just 1 second. What does it mean hashniya?
The relatives are mutter to Levi.
Why is he use the word shniya? There's no shniya here. There's only one Yevamot.
Well, he's the second brother.
Right, so it should have said umuter bekrovas hayevamos, or ein asheni nesa bekrovas hayevamos. But the language of muter bekrovas hashniya, I would write a letter to the editor. Let me see. I don't know. I don't know what the word shnia means. Okay. I'm careful because I just want to make sure I'm not missing a piece of the puzzle. He has a note here that Levi is only going to be allowed to marry Rachel's relatives if he's not the one to give a chalitza. Because once he gives a chalitza, then they become provas chalutzas. Okay, that's fine. That's.
But in this case, Shimon could still do Yibum as well.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, if the mimer of Levi, it doesn't mean anything.
Oh, 1 second. What are we talking about now? Let me just get my head screwed on right. So we're talking about a case of Shimon and Levi gave Maimar to Rachel. Since the Maimar of, we're going to Rabbi Gamliel, the Maimar of Levi is meaningless. So you're right. Now Shimon has the option of being Miyabim. Just 1 second. Let's see it inside. He says, "V'cheina ta'omer b'shnei Yevamot Yevamah achas, also b'kol echad maimer, das Rav Gamliel, maimer rishon chana, utzricha get lemamora." Oh, that's a strange language. Utzricha. Oh, you are mechaven to the Yalkut HaBiurim, which I don't have in front of me right now. It's in the back, but he says here, "V'urei v'Yalkut HaBiurim." Does anyone question that? If no one questions that, we're on very solid ground. He seems to assume nobody questions that, so that's good. Okay, it's good. So again, Shimon and Levi both gave Maimar to Rachel. Is cholu kinyone shneim utzricha get mishneim ukrovosea asuros al shneim. Oh, that makes sense. Krovosea asuros al shneim. Now he's talking. Omar Mar. No saying get was zeh. The get was zeh. Ragamliel Omer choletz l'rishona v'osu b'krovosea umutu b'krovas. Krovos Shnia. So 1 second. Nelson get a Z. I understand why it says no sin. The word no sin bothers. I'm sorry. We're talking about a case where Rachel and Leah fell for Yibum to Shimon. There's only one Yavam. And Shimon went ahead and he did a maimar to both Rachel and Leah. We called him a Baal Taiva. He wants to marry both of them. Again, I don't take me literal. It's just a mnemonic device. So Rav Gamliel says, no saying get l'rishona. Oh, wait a minute. No saying get l'zu v'get l'zu. Where do we see that? Just 1 second. No saying get. 1 second. I just want to see the Bryce inside. Where is this Bryce? It says Omar Mar. Omar Mar always means something that we saw before. No saying get forget. I think it should say no.
The Torah Rabbanon.
Yeah, but in my Torah Rabbanon, tell me if I'm wrong, it says Shtei Yevamot shenaflu l'fnei Yavam echa v'nosan get l'zu v'get l'zu.
Yeah.
And here it says Omar Mar no saying get l'zu, which means nosan get l'zu. Now, I don't want to get hung up on this, but I just want to make sure we got the right case. Okay, I'll tell you what. If you'll give me poetic license here, I'm going to assume it should say Nasan get Lazu, forget Lazu. Well, in your Gemara it says no saying, in my Gemara it says no saying. Again, I don't know. Again, this is a chutzpah gedola on my part, but if it fits, let's try it. If that's okay with him. It should say Nasan get, because the word no saying is very strange. What do you mean no saying get Lazu? Who's going to encourage a Yavam to give a get to both the Yevamos? The word no say. But Nasan get Lazu, v'get Lazu. Rav Gamliel Omer Choletz l'Rishona. The Asa b'Krovos, Muta b'Krovos Shniyah. Right? Rav Gamliel holds Ein get liachar get. And therefore, when he gave a get, this Shimon, he's the only act in town, and he gave a get to Leah after having given a get to Rachel. So that second get does not register, and therefore mutar b'krovos hashniyah. Now, why cholis the Rishona? Because he's already usher to the krovos of the Rishona, because he gave her a get, and that first get is valid midrabban, and therefore her krovos are called krovos krushos. Again, all that is the rabban. So far, so good.
So this isn't saying after he did.
No, I don't think so.
Maimar?
No, I think this is going back on get liachar get. Do you want to try it for Maimar liachar Maimar?
Yeah, that's what I think.
All right, let's see if it works. Just 1 second. No, because in Maimar liachar Maimar, he says no saying get l'rishona.
So this would be the chachamim. He gives that to both.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, 1 second. Sorry. Okay, so we're talking about a case of Maimar Achar Maimar. And then the Chachamim say, no saying Again, in the Bryce, it's again a little different than the Brisa, because Chacham say no to get the shtein. Okay, so all right. So I don't know. Now you're really throwing a monkey wrench here, and it could be you're right. I'm wrong. I don't know. Let's go on, and maybe we'll work Lamafreya. We'll go retroactive. Is lema tevi tuvta the Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel. Now again, I'm just going to read to you Masechet. That doesn't mean that this is the only act, the only possibility. But he says Yavam shenaflu lefanav. This is Shmuel I'm talking about. Naflu lefanav shtei Yevamos. V'nosan li achas me'en get. Okay, now cholatz lebalas haget. Lo niftera Sarah. What does this mean? Lo niftera Sarah. What does it mean? She needs a get as well? Or she needs chalitza as well? What's going on here? Lo niftera Sarah. Kevan shechalitzas balas haget. Chalitza psuli mishum shas v'mais gerish. See, I have the words nasa ba maisa gerish. He could have said nasa ba maisa maimar. I don't know. Nasa ba maisa gerish. Ina osar solus yavim min rabbanon. Ve'ilu b'tarasalo nasa maisa gerish. Ina osar sol yivum. So in other words, if I understand this correctly, since he has a possibility of being miyabim the shnia, is therefore she needs chalitza. He gave chalitza to the Rishona. That doesn't help for the shnia because the shnia falls for Yibum. Okay, now, so what? So again, what I understand here is the question of whether the chalitza to the Rishona is meaningful for the Shnia, and the Gemara is presenting a contradiction here between Rav Gamliel and Shmuel, so to speak. Shmuel seems to require a second chalitza to the Shnia. The Shnia is not going to get out of it without her own personal chalitza, whereas Rav Gamliel seems to assume that one chalitza is enough. Now, exactly what is the case here that we're dealing with? Omar Mar, no saying get lezu, forget lezu. So you're saying, Steve, that there was a mimer to both, and we're going to the Chachamim from Gamliel. I wanted to change the gears, which is a big strike against me. I could say it says Nasan instead of Nosan. Okay, so Gamliel Omer, Cholitz Rishona. Cholitz Rishona, I don't get it. I don't know. I honestly think that he's referring to a case of get, not of mine. Well, do you have any footnote on it? I'm just curious. Well, Jeff, maybe you have a footnote on Omar Mar, right after Omar Mar. Or even the commentary itself, maybe even without a foot.
Along at the end of that, goes into the dika of the one who received the get herself is carried to the co-wife. Consequently, the litza that is formed from the get recipient is carried to the formed with her. Shmuel maintains that an inferior chalitza not release a co-op, who has a superior zika. In our case, Rabban Gamliel considers the second get ineffective, the second Yevamot zika. How can the performance of chalitza for the first Yevamot the release of it?
Oh, wait, just 1 second. He says that the get to the second one is not valid.
Ineffective.
It's ineffective. So does that itself give it away? Let me just think for a second. See, that language that the second get is not valid, is not effective, I think indicates that we're talking about a case where he gave 2 gittin, right? Because, I don't want to be medayik too much in the language of Matsko, but if we would talk about a case where he gave mimer to each of the 2 of them, then I don't know if you would say, well, the second get is ineffective. Rabban Gamliel says he doesn't give a get to this. We're still on a very thin, we're standing on a very thin air, so to speak. But let's try it. Let's try it again. We'll take it from the top. Omar Mar. So we're going to assume that Nasan get lezu v'get lezu. Again, I admit that there's a problem here with the girsa. I don't know how to deal with it. So if that be the case, we're going back to the beginning of Tanu Rabban. Right? So the beginning, in the Masechet, it's on a different page because that's how it works with Masechet. So the beginning of Tanu Rabbanon, it says Ketzad blah blah blah. Shtei Yevam shenaflu fnei Yavam echad. B'nosan get lezu v'get lezu. Yeah. So what does he say? Rabban Gamliel Omer choletz l'rishona. So that fits in, right? I'm just comparing the ratio of the brisa to our Omar Mar. Choletz l'rishona. The Asa b'krovol seha, umutar b'krovol shniya. Good. So again, the only drawback in this reading of the Gemara is that I changed the word nosein to the word nasa. I don't know if that's tragic. Honestly, I don't know. It could be that itself is what do they call it in sports? When you foul so many times that they throw you out of the game. What's that called? Foul out. Maybe that itself is a foul out. I don't know. All right. So let's see Shmuel. Now let's see if we can fit Shmuel into the same scenario, in the same structure. We're talking about 2 Yevamos and 1 Yavam. But again, it's not exactly the same case because in the brisa, the cases where he gave 2 gittin to 2 Yevamos. I don't know that Shmuel is talking about. It could be that Shmuel, we're going to make an analogy between Shmuel and Rabban Gamliel. So let's go slow. Let's say that, right, there's only Shimon. He's the only act in town, and he gave a get to Rachel. Then what did he do? Choletz l'balas haget. So after giving a get to Rachel, we forced him to give chalitza to Rachel. Why? Because the get is not going to be matir min Torah. It's not going to be mafkia the zikas yibum. It's lo niftera tsara. Which means that Leah needs her own chalitza. Am I right? How does that work with your notes? Does that stim with your notes that Leah now needs her own chalitza? In other words, what we're basically saying is that when Shimon gives Rachel a get, again, this is all Shmuel's mindset. When he gave her a get, then he's removing, just 1 second, he's removing. In other words, it's almost as if on a D'Rabbanan level, by recognizing this get, what the Rabbanan is saying is it's like chalitza. But it's only a chalitza after get, which means that it's only a chalitza vis-a-vis Rachel, but it's not a chalitza that's valid vis-a-vis Leah. So that, in a sense, on a D'Rabbanan level, the get replaces chalitza. Again, the Torah requires chalitza, so we have no qualms about it. We must require chalitza, but in a certain sense, on a D'Rabbanan level, we have to sort of like black out the Torah law, and it was the get that already broke up the zikas yibum. So on a D'Rabbanan level, the chalitza is sort of meaningless. But with regard to Leah, she desperately needs a full-fledged chalitza. So the chalitza that he gives to Rachel is a hinkadiker chalitza. That's a Yiddish word meaning lame. Lame. It's a lame. It's a Leah. It's a chalitza of a, right? Because he already gave her a get. If he already gave her a get, the Rabbanan are recognizing that get, then he's already broken up the zika with the get. Again, all under the Rabbanan level. It's amazing. So that although technically he has to give a chalitza, but really on a Rabbanan level, that's a meaningless chalitza. He already gave her a get. But when we get to Leah, she needs a real chalitza, a kosher chalitza from A to Z. That's a full-fledged chalitza. Now let's see how we plug this back into Rav Gamliel. Right, Rav Gamliel says that choletz l'rishona, which means that the shniya does not need chalitza. Now, since the chalitza to the rishona was following a get, again, don't pay any attention to the second get that he gave to Leah. That's irrelevant because that doesn't register at all. Meaningless. So Memela, according to Shmuel's logic, Leah desperately needs chalitza because the chalitza that he gives to Rachel is a, you call it a chalitza psula. It's not really a chalitza. Again, all in a D'Rabbanan level. In the Raisa, it's a perfectly healthy chalitza. He says ulidvarav, meaning according to Shmuel, lo haya l'Rav Gamliel lomar shecholetz l'rishona. The kevan she grusha, right? He's already given Rachel a get. Chalitzasa psula. It's like a secondary chalitza because the Rabbanan recognized the power of the get to remove the zika. But hashniya ain't a grusha, which means ain't get liachar get according to Rav Gamliel. V'chalitzasa kshera. Is therefore chalitzas rishona. She balas a get. Ain't a poteres as sarasa shlon is garsha. So how could it be that Rav Gamliel says choletz rishona, and that's enough? Amalachot Shmuel ki amri anna when I said that because of the get to the Rishon, the get now, right, to get to the Rishona now makes the chalitza into a second-rate chalitza. Therefore, the tzara needs a chalitza of her own. Aliba demandi Omar yesh zika. Gamliel sover ain't zika. He says, Masha amarti shechalitza b'yevama, meaning after get, is not going to be a valid chalitza to patter up the Yevama, the other tzara, because she has a full-fledged zika. That's aliva demandi Omar yesh zika. But Rav Gamliel holds ain't zika. I'm going to read to you what he translates. He says, "Ein zika sayevama chazaka kol kach." You can't take ein zika literally. I mean, all of Masechet Yevamot is built on zika, but it's not chazaka kol kach. Hakein ein chiluk bein yevama ra'uya liyibum, which is the one that didn't get the get, or whatever get she got is a piece of paper. Liyevama she'ein ra'uya liyibum, which is the balas I get. The chalitzas achas poteres es tzaros. So when I need a full-fledged, when I recognize the power of zika and I consider it a full-fledged ishus, so that therefore Shmuel says the secondary chalitza doesn't patter up the Yevama, the tzara, because she is almost married. She needs a full-fledged chalitza. She needs a real McCoy chalitza. But Rav Gamliel's of the opinion it ain't zika. He's not going to go so far as to say that as far as the relationship between Shimon and Leah, the Shnia, it's almost like a marriage relationship that she needs a full-fledged chalitza. That's the best that we can do. Let's see. What is the Gemara going to say now? Umida Rav Gamliel savar zika, Rabbanan savar yesh zika. We'll see if we can pick that up tomorrow. Again, that's going to be a challenge because the sugya ends with Omar Mar. Where's Omar Mar? Oh yeah, Omar Mar, which is line, let's say 8 or 9. So we still have these first 8 or 9. So we're up to meter Rav Gamliel in Zika, mamash at the bottom here of an Aleph. Okay, so I wish you a great day. Tomorrow's what? Is Wednesday?
Wednesday. Yeah.
That happened. It happened. Now we'll do a little introduction to Nida, and I wish you a great day. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.